What's up YouTube, and welcome along to another draw along with me. Today's video is this fiery nebula planet that was voted for on my Instagram poll. If you're new here, I do weekly tutorials, so please feel free to subscribe down below and turn on the notification bell so you get notified about all my new videos as and when I post them. As always, there's a link in the description to the palette that I'm using in this design so you can follow along with the exact same colours, as well as a link to the tree brush that you're going to need towards the end of the design to follow along completely from start to finish. And so with all that said, let's get started and create our canvas. So we're going to come up to the plus and then hit the custom canvas, and our canvas size is 2500 by 2500 and DPI set to 300. So once we're in, we're just going to change our background color, and let's just set that to black by double tapping in the bottom area of the disc, and that will jump straight to black. And so let's grab white now from the top left hand corner, and let's go to our brush library, and under calligraphy let's select the monoline brush, and it doesn't matter what size it is for this. We're just going to draw a circle in the middle of the screen, which can be our main planet, and as always hold your pen at the end when you get to the start point, which will draw an ellipse, and then if you pop your finger on the screen you can make a perfect circle. And let's drag in the white to fill that shape, and I'm just going to adjust mine ever so slightly so it fits where I want it to be. Also, if you turn on snapping in the bottom left hand corner, you'll get the guides, so if you see the orange line, it's perfectly in the center of the design. And let's leave that there so it's slightly above the middle point. And as we've done before in previous tutorials, we're going to create a new layer for the liquify effect of the planet. So we're going to go to our palette here, and let's drag in this color here and fill in the whole screen on a new layer. So I created a new layer and filled it in with that blue. And then we're going to go to our brush library, and we're going to go to the airbrushing and select the soft brush. Let's make that roughly around about 50%. Let's go back to our colors, and this is where you can have free reign really. You can create whatever colors you want in whatever pattern you want. I always do diagonal lines really, and I'm just using any of these colors here. So I just started with that one. I'm going to use the lighter one now, just add in some streaks like so, because all of these are going to get merged together shortly anyway. And then I'm going to grab a darker color and just add in some very fine darker areas as well, just so we get a bit of contrast when it comes to drawing the liquify effect. So now I'm happy with that. I'm going to go to my adjustments, I'm going to go to liquify, and I'm going to make sure that twirl right is the option selected, and you can see my sizes down the bottom here. And I'm just going to drag our pen from left to right, which first of all gets the direction of the lines, which is always nice, you know, you're getting that horizontal look to it. But by all means at this point everybody can do their own style. You can start to either hold your pen down and create lots of little twirls like that, but I'm gonna try and steer away from that a little bit. If you go a little bit slower, you get a bit more detail and more twirls in there, like so. Let's just continue to just drag that all along, and then I'm going to leave it like that. And tap on our adjustments at the top, and then that is done. And then we're going to grab our cursor, I'm going to go to uniform, and we're just going to drag that down roughly so it overlays the circle that we created. And then we're going to tap on that layer and select clipping mask, and that's now nicely clipped that layer to the circle we created. Now the only other extra little touch you can do here is if we go up to a cursor and select the option of warp, you can bring these corners in to the circle, and that sometimes gives a more circular look to the liquify effect that we added onto the planet. So now we can get started on the shading. So let's create a new layer and tap on that and select the option of clipping mask. And I'm going to continue with our soft airbrush that we previously used. And for the shading, I'm going to start with this one here in the top right hand corner, and I'm just going to make my way around this bottom left hand edge here. Again, as always, every tutorial, start off nice and light and build the colour up. You don't need to go in too heavy too quickly. And then I'm starting to darken up that edge a bit more, leaving this top right hand area. And then I'm going to go to my colors and I'm going to select this one here underneath it. So we're going even darker now, and just round this edge off a bit more. And then we'll finally move all the way down to black and just skim that edge a little bit with the black. And that should give it a nice sort of shadowed side to it. And then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to tap on that and select the option of clipping mask. So we've done our shadows, and now we'll just add in some highlight. And I like to use the brightest color in the design, which is this one here. And then just in a circular motion, just add a little spot in the top sort of right hand corner, so we add some more spherical look to this. Now we're going to go in and add some extra highlight shortly anyway, but these are the foundations of that. So next what we want to do is, just so we know our proportions for the design, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to grab a dark color. So let's go to our color picker and select this one here for the moment, this one here in the top right hand corner. I'm going to go to our brush library, I'm going to select the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush, and then we're just going to draw a straight line across the screen. Hold your pen at the end, which does a perfectly straight line, and then if you pop your finger on the screen, it will do a perfectly horizontal line. And then because you went from edge to edge, you should be able to drag and drop your color in like so. And now that's going to be the ocean layer underneath. We can now position our planet where we want it. So go to the circle layer that we created, and then swipe from left to right to select the other layers above. And then all you can do is grab your cursor, make sure you use the option of uniform because we were last on warp, and just drag it into position so that the bottom edge is slightly hidden behind that ocean layer we just created. So next up, we want to get started on some of the background. So let's create a new layer and then drag and drop that layer right towards the bottom underneath our planet. And what we want to start off with is start to build up the little nebula look to it around the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the color white, and we're going to go to our brush library. We're going to scroll down to the area called luminance, and in here there's a lot of different brushes that you can use to create nice light effects, and we're going to use two of them today, the nebula and also the light leak. And with this layer now selected in this brush, my brush size is roughly around about the 17% mark, and we're on the new layer right at the very bottom, just around the edge of the planet that we drew. Again, very lightly, just went around the edge there, and it creates a nice random lighting effect. So it's very light to start with, and that's fine. That's our little foundation for it. And then what we want to do is create another new layer, and we're going to build up all these background layers now until we get the lighting that we want. And we're going to go to our colors, and let's select this color here. It's the third one in. Go to our brush library, let's go back to the airbrushing, and what you can do here is a little tip. If you make your brush size relatively large, let's say around about the 40% mark, if I tap in the middle of the screen, it creates a airbrushed circle, and then if you go to your cursor, you can drag that up, scale it up at how big and small you want, and it's a circular glow then, and you can just position that where you want it, which we're going to leave it roughly like that, so we get a nice edge, and also the white layer that we just created is now starting to show a bit more. So next we can then also add in some extra lighting towards the top edge here, and then that will really start to build up the colors for this design. So let's go to our layers, let's go back to the planet layers, and then let's create a new layer, tap on that and make sure it's clipped also to the planet. Let's go to our colors and let's select white by double tapping the top left hand corner. So make our soft brush very small under airbrushing, and let's make that roughly around about 5%. And I'm going to zoom in slightly at tilt just to the way I draw, maybe make that even smaller, roughly down to 3%, and just create a little stroke around that top edge until you get a little bit like that. So you come in from outside the circle and then come out like that. So come out, in and out, and you get a nice little edge to that. And then let's go to our layer options for that layer, and let's scroll down until we get the option of overlay. And overlay is great because you can start to really build up some extra colors, and it will really start to punch out the effects underneath it. So what we'll do again, now we've got the sort of base of that, I'm going to make my brush size bigger again, roughly to around about 10%, and go slightly wider and come in again and go out like so. And we're slowly building up this light edge right at the very top here. And let's go to our layers and create another new layer. And we're going to use the option of clipping mask again. And let's set this one straight off the bat to add, and then make our brush size small again, roughly to 3%, and do the exact same line that we did, but this time it will really start to punch out that white and really give that glow effect. And what we also want to do is make our brush size larger again to 10% and add in a nice little spot of lighting just here, like so. So now we've got the direction of this light, we also need to make sure on the background layer that that light's also being shown through. So let's go back down to our layers that for the background. So we had this nice big blue area. Let's create another new layer. And then let's go to our colors and let's select this one here, again, the third color in, or you could go for the second one. It's totally up to you. And let's make our brush size roughly about 8%, maybe slightly smaller at 7. And then what we want to do is we just want to come from inside the planet, go outside of it, and then come back in the same direction like that we did for the light source. So again, I'm going to double that up. And then what we've done is we just created a nice extra bit of glow around that top edge there, just so that we've got a more of a relationship to this brighter section here. And really we could go in and just stroke that again one more time, just to add in some extra color there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the luminance effect in the background. So what we want to then do is create a new layer, and then we're going to go to our brush library and under luminance select the light leak option. Now this is a really nice brush because if I draw from left to right for you, you can see that the luminance brush of the light leak, it uses a lot of related colors to the color you selected. So this is obviously the color I've selected, but it's using a lot of different colors and maybe colors you wouldn't expect to use, but it does it for you, which is awesome. So you can really, you know, create some colors that maybe you weren't going to use or experiment with. So I'm going to use the third color in our palette, and what I'm firstly going to do is around about the 15% mark, I'm going to go right around the edge of the planet like so, which starts to create nice little bits of lighting upwards. And I'm going to make my brush size quite big, around about 30%, and I'm just going to go a little bit wider than that this time and try and get some extra. Again, I'm going really lightly as always and build up that color right around the edge like so. And what we want to do is, our lighting so far is very concentrated in the center, so all we want to do next is just try and create some more glow in the night sky behind. So as always with all my tutorials, we're building up the colors, we're building up the style as we go. So let's go down to the very bottom layer and create a new one, and let's go drag that right to the very bottom. And then what I think we should do is let's grab this blue color here. So this is the fourth one in from the right hand side. Let's go back to our brush library though and change it to airbrushing and back to soft brush. And let's tap our brush in the middle of the screen so it creates quite a punchy circle. And then we can just freeform that to how we want it to be and where we want it to be. So I've gone quite wide. Let's try and position this. What I'm trying to do is create more of a glow around this bottom half here and make it slightly wider. So something roughly like that is fine. And that's just creating more of a lighting effect in this little area in the center. Now, what we want to do is also start to create that more mystical effect right around the edge of the planet that we did earlier on with the nebula brush, but now we've got all the colors built up underneath, we can really now start to add it in quite punchy. So let's create a new layer above the light leak layer, but underneath our planet still. And for this one, let's use this second color. Let's go to our brush library and select the option under luminance for nebula. Make our brush size quite small, about 10%, maybe slightly smaller, and just go around the edge of the planet. And again, this brush will also create different colors as well. If you chose a color, you could select white, but I've gone with the color, so we get a nice random hue of colors and it continues to match what's happening in the background. And at this point, we've now got that nice mystical effect right around the edge of the planet there. So now what we want to do is let's add some stars into the background here as well. So it will start to really define this background sky. So let's go to our layers and select a layer here, just underneath our planet and above our light leak layer. And let's go to our colors and double tap to select white. Go to your brush library and select calligraphy, and under monoline make it as small as possible, your brush, and just tap away, creating your stars in the sky. Start off at 1% and make sure you tap on the screen rather than drag your line, because otherwise you will create a line. And like so, and then maybe make your brush size slightly bigger and create some varying different sizes of stars. Maybe let's go even bigger than that. And try and create some nice little constellations quite close to one another, and then the rest all nicely spread out. Make that small again. Just add in, it just creates more filler for that sky, but also brings in the fact that it is now a nighttime sky. And what I want to do now is just go to that layer and go to its layer options and just drop its opacity down roughly to, I like usually around about 30%, but let's go 30 to 40, something like that. Let's go 40% and leave that like that. So now we've got that fiery sort of planet, we've got the night sky in behind it, and what we can now do is I just want to go back to our layers, and this layer here that we created at the very bottom for the blue, I'm just going to go to my freeform tool and I'm going to drag it upwards. I want that blue to creep up the screen towards the top edge, and all I've done is gone to freeform and just dragged up the top like so, which just creates more light in that top edge of the sky, making sure that our lighting goes right towards the edge. Now I've dragged that up to the top, I'm happy with that. So now what we can do is start to work on the reflection underneath. So firstly we need to group every layer other than the ocean floor layer that we created here. Swipe them all to the left, and what we're doing now is we're selecting multiple layers in one go. And let's go to group, and then that's all now been put in a group, so it's nice and collapsible. And what we want to do is we want to swipe that to the left and use the option of duplicate. And then what we want to do is on the top group, we want to go to the option of tapping on it and selecting flatten. And now all of those layers are now one layer. And then we want to drag that layer up to the very top above our ocean layer. And we know you've done that correctly because you will now be able to see it in front. And then let's go to our cursor at the top and let's select the option of flip vertical. So now that design is upside down, and you want to drag it into position roughly so that these corners all match. And then go to your layers, tap on that flattened layer and use the option of clipping mask, which has now clipped it to the ocean layer that we created initially. So now you can start to see how that's all starting to come together. And what we now want to do is we want to use the smudge tool, which we've not used in many tutorials before. And you want to go to painting, and under painting select the option of dry brush. And what I like to do here is I like to make my brush size quite large, as obviously the closer to you the waves would be slightly bigger, and the further away obviously they'd be smaller. So I'm going to make my brush size roughly around that 30% mark. I'm going to swipe from left to right. You can hold your brush as well at the end if you want to create a perfect line, but waves are not always straight. And just for the first third at the bottom here, just keep swiping it left and right. Let's keep smudging it left and right like so, and then bring your brush size down to 20% and then work on the next third upwards. So just swiping that left to right like so, and then for the final third at the top of this ocean layer, drop it down to 10% and continue to swipe that left and right like so. So using those numbers of 10, 20, 30, you can nicely remember what sizes you used. And if you want to go back in now, for example, if I want to go into this top section here, I can just bring it back up to 30%. And if I want to continue smudging that out a bit more, I can do so like that. Make sure you're just going straight across to an extent, just so that at least all your lines match up and you get that nice horizontal wave look to your design. And that's looking cool. So what we now want to do is we just want to change the ocean layer that we created underneath just to darken it down a little bit. So let's go to our colors and let's just select the second color on the bottom right hand corner in the second row and just drag and drop that into this ocean layer. So we now still get this nice defining line, so it's quite obvious that there's like a edge to this landscape here, but we also bring it a bit more inclusive into the color palette. And finally, what we want to do is, based on the TikTok design I did, we want to create a new layer towards the top. Let's use the color black, double tap towards the bottom of your color disc. And let's go to your brush library, select monoline under calligraphy. And on that new layer, right at the very top, we're just going to create a landscape. So like a kind of circular landscape, like so. So it's arcing downwards and swooping back up. And if you went from edge to edge correctly, you should be able to drag and drop your color in there. And you should be able to see the shape that you created. Now I just want to go in and just make some little adjustments on this side so that they're both the same height, roughly. Like so. And now, if you downloaded the brush in the description, you should now have the tree set available to you. And now we're just going to add some trees here at the bottom just to finalize the design. Now you could scroll all the way down and just use one of these tree silhouettes, and you can quite literally just tap on the screen and add in a big amount of trees in one go. You could do something like that, but I like to be in control of where the trees are and which ones. So that's, at this point, it's your decision on where you want to go with it. But I'm going to scroll up to tree silhouette 1 and make my brush size roughly, let's say 40%, and just see how that looks on the screen. So let's go a bit bigger than that. And on the left, I want to make them nice and large. And then as they get towards the center, they're kind of swooping down the hill. So that was roughly 60%. I'm going to go to tree silhouette 2 and make that roughly 55 and just tap like so. And I'm going to continue to make my way down these brushes until I'm happy with how they're laid out. I'm going to get tree silhouette 4 and just bringing my brush size roughly down like 5% at a time every time. Now what you could do if you wanted to for this style, you could also use the same brushes, so 3 brushes repeatedly. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop that down to roughly 35 and then continue to just repeat the same 3 brushes and just continue to make them smaller until I'm happy with how much tree content I've got here. Now I personally don't always like it when there's gaps in the trees like here, so I'm going to go to my brushes and I'm going to go to my calligraphy. Now I like it when it's down here, but not so much when it's right on the very edge of the screen, because I like it to nicely be rounded off. So I'm going to fill in those little gaps there. But other than that, very happy with the trees on that left hand side. And I'm going to repeat the process on the right hand side now with potentially 3 different trees. So let's go back into here. Let's go to roughly 60%, I believe we were at. And then tap, and that's a good one there. Let's go to tree silhouette 7. And 8. Again, as always with a lot of my designs, at this point everybody's design is going to start to look a little bit different. You'll do your trees slightly different. You may add more, you may add less, you may space them slightly different, and that's great. Everybody's design should look slightly different. You're putting your own twist on everything, and that's always the best way to do it. You're just learning by doing it like so. And now I'm going to go back to my brushes and I'm going to go back to my calligraphy brush, monoline. And again, as always, just my personal preference, just going to fill in some of these gaps here because I like it to round right off towards the edge of the screen. And that concludes our tutorial for today. So if you followed along with today's tutorial, please feel free to share your design with me on Instagram. I repost everybody's design that they tag me in on my story, so you can get the credit you deserve for your beautiful creations. If you're not already following me on Instagram and TikTok, the links are in the description, as well as a link to my Patreon. If you like this video, please feel free to drop it a like down below, as well as drop me a comment to let me know how you got on. If you have any troubles at all, please feel free to drop me a DM on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to help out with your issue. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.